All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Semo?
We have Wheel of Time, Path of Daggers, Part 2.
All right, and I'm going
And
to try
I
and get
figured
a.
since I can't wear my Matt hat for a whole book, this one fits the girls.
I was afraid that's what that was. All right, so I'm trying to give myself a nicotine buzz because I managed to actually do my full squat workout today. It's been a while, but now I'm completely drained and worn out. Um, this is
Oh,
a AJ
we started.
Fernandez.
Go ahead.
Because you asked last time, and I made sure to keep the wrapper this time so I could remember. This is AJ Fernandez cigars, their New World line. This is the Oscuro, and I like it. It's kind of what I was looking for, of mild with just kind of a hint of the natural sweetness. Except this is half of it, so it's like a Churchill. So
Hmm.
it was good, but I think we said last time we prefer like a cigarillo because that's just way too much smoke
Well, no,
in one.
I like the big. Okay, so disclaimers. Don't take this the wrong way. I like the big thick ones, but I like them to be shorter, but just because they taste burnt by the end if they're too long.
Yes, yes,
And so if you can get it through it in about a half an hour, that's about right. I'd rather have two shorter ones than the one super long one that tastes burnt by the end.
yeah. So I smoked half of this and I was like, "Whoo, I cannot anymore," and I will be way too buzzed to do anything. So then I clipped it and I've just been gnawing on it. But also to your point, there's too much burndiness because it starts to dry out, and then the dry is the no good. So
Well, and sometimes two sets of something good is better than one long set. You kind of get more out of it because you can kind of get every little bit of it and enjoy every flavor without it just kind of you get numb to it after a certain point.
yeah. Well, I mean, literally sometimes, because if it's a really strong cigar, your mouth will start to tingle because
Mm-hmm.
of the nicotine. Okay. All
Well,
right.
in any
So,
flavor, I mean, just think of it like a really rich food. You're kind of
yes.
even if it's like
Yeah,
the
that's a
best
good
thing
point.
you tasted right at the beginning, you're kind of done before you finish the meal. So you need those things in small doses. This is where I understand the chefs that make the small little meals,
Hmm.
but at the same time, it just depends on the quality of it, how strong it is. Let's see. I'm also bringing up comments because I wanted to do comments first
Okay.
today. But to your workout point, we started the week off with a bang. I told you I was hurting on Wednesday.
Yeah.
So Monday was deadlifts, and I was kind of on an off week, so it's challenge week. And we always preach about don't always make every workout like a competition, but sometimes you need to do it. So I brought up an oldie but goodie. I did the EMOMs every minute on the minute deadlifts, 315 for 30 minutes, 3 reps for the first 10 and 2 reps for the next 20. So 70 reps of 315 deadlifts.
Whew.
Uh, in total, and I finished the leg workout after that. So in total, it was about 35,000 pounds of volume load. And that had me going all week. I kind of made a short and sweet, just stimulate the body workout yesterday. So it's uh, that'll do, pig. That'll do.
Yeah. Well, I'm experimenting with a kind of hybrid. So I prefer push-pull leg splits because I know I need it, but I hate doing just mobility work. So if I lift 6 times a week, then I'm gonna make myself do mobility work because that's basically what my warm up is. Because I need a really long warm up to get all the kinks unkinked. So I'm doing 3 days of kind of standard weightlifting 101 3x10 stuff, and then 5x5 of core stuff. So a couple days ago I did weighted dips as my upper body because for whatever reason that aggravates my neck a lot less than an overhead press.
Hmm.
So I do weighted dips instead of overhead press. And then
Well,
uh
I could tell you why already just from having worked out with you. Because
what
when you
oh
do
so my
overhead press, you shrug up your shoulders
mm,
as you go. So that's therein lies the problem. But
well, there you
but
there's your problem.
just saying don't do it doesn't always solve
Mm,
the problem. So
no.
but but yeah. Okay, so on to the comments. The first comment. Okay, so I read the first comment and then I didn't read any of the other ones at first because I thought it was all inclusive, but it says not much to say about this episode. It really didn't cover much controversial. But then he goes on to comment 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more times. So there was something to cover, I guess. Gawain has become a verb. He Gawained it. Okay, that would probably be spoilers territory. Yeah, I've got plenty of Gawain memes for when those sections come up again. So
Oh.
so and they're very I'm not going to use the word hateful. We use the word not friendly towards him. If I said I okay, so this is the one I read and I wanted to cover first. So I think we should kind of pivot to doing the comments first, unless they're spoilier. But this one I thought was relevant. If Aes Sedai don't unravel weaves, what did Moiraine do at the lakes by the Seven Towers in the Eye of the World? So what I did is I got this book back out and I read it. So we'll go to that section. Where was it? See. It is page, if you have the Eye of the World, 733. She's sitting there with her eyes closed. And then she opened her eyes and started down towards the hill for me to remove the last vestige of what I did here last night. And this is probably what he's referring to. Her unraveling the weaves. It's just, she says, the residues would have dissipated in their own in a day, but I will not take that risk if I can avoid it now. We are too close to the shadow, and the shadow is too strong here. So that can be interpreted as unraveling the weaves, but I don't think it was. I think
it
it
was
was more of a
another weave
sweeping
that
up the
she.
dust. Yeah, I think it was more of a sweeping up the dust, especially since to unravel the weaves, you would have to see the weaves. And she closed her eyes through this process. So either it was a flub on a little bit of a fumble on Jordan's part, because even in the Eye of the World, he might not have had the whole unraveling the weave process fully made in his mind till he got to it. But also, yeah, you would have to see the weaves to unravel them, and unless you could make the argument that Moiraine was so familiar with her own weaves that she would be able to do it with her eyes closed. But then why would you purposefully close your eyes like you're doing a meditation? So I think it was more of a sweeping up of the residues, and I think he makes other kind of references to a different process that's more like that with other weaves later, and actually probably earlier in the books, where they basically just kind of hide what they did before versus actually unraveling the weave itself. So yeah, that it could be interpreted that way, but I think the best interpretation is probably more of a cleaning up after your job than actually doing something that is unforbidden. It's not only forbidden, but seems to be a hidden talent, because you would be assigning a talent to Moiraine. And you know, as badass as she is, you know, we got to put limits on how many talents we can give somebody.
Yeah, and from the way Avienda describes it, it sounds like all wise one apprentices who can channel are taught the idea or the concept, but they can't all do it. And they don't all do it if they're not competent in it, because it's so dangerous. So and there are just a few, it sounds like there are just a few who actually have the talent to do it. Or at least when it comes to especially complex weaves. Which I think was the danger here. And then we see again in a little bit the consequences of it, that a gateway is an incredibly complex weave and an incredibly powerful weave. It takes a lot of power.
Well, it's so complex that it's a new thing again to this age.
Yeah.
All right. That's what there's next one. I read Eye of the World in 1990 when it was the only book published. My original copy only listed The Great Hunt as the only other book in the series. I cringe every time I hear someone say they read Wheel of Time as a preteen or teen. There are concepts and philosophies here that are intended for adults with experience, with wide ranges of reading and exposure to other cultures and mythologies. Well, I read it as a preteen teen. But
I don't also cringe, but I
also talk about how different it was when I read it as an adult.
Well, that's what makes good stuff so good. You know, Calvin and Hobbes. There's a lot of depth to the humor in Calvin and Hobbes, But if you're an elementary kid, eagerly awaiting the paper just so you can read the funnies, it's just funny. But then as you get older, you start to see some of the little quirks and some of the depth and some of the philosophy that he kind of weaves in there. And it's the same thing with Wheel of Time. Is it's a cool story, regardless of anything else. It's just a cool, fun story in a great fantasy world. You're not going to get the depth though, and there may be some things that just won't make sense if you can't, see the depth, if you can't understand the assumptions and what's going on between the lines. But to your point, that's why it's so rereadable.
Well, and also there is something to be said about a young preteen teen reading this and getting lessons that they may not be getting at home. And
Mhm.
and that might be part of the reason why I came out okay, even though things were pretty shitty during that point of my life.
Mhm.
So, you can get father figures without the actual person being there if you find the right influences. In fact, if you find the right influences, you can find your anti-heroes in your real life. And then you can model yourself to be the opposite of those people instead of just finding your fate in that.
Yeah.
There's a few other comments, but those were the main ones I wanted to get to. Uh, yeah, the Morden one might be, yeah, that's kind of spoilery. Rand, okay, so Rand and the three women don't actually marry, but he
Mhm.
does mutually bond them. So
Cute.
they still should have fought. They still should have fought.
It's
And
tradition.
if you bypass Rand as a natural hero of the story, Nynaeve is the best character arc. Yeah, as an adult, I see that. As a
Mhm.
teenager, I didn't see that.
Yeah, as a teenager, she was annoying for quite some time. Even here, she's still annoying, but
But you
she's
understand,
understandable.
yeah.
Yeah, because we're about to get to one of her annoying quirks here when they get to the farm and she tries to take charge, but there's nothing really for her to
Well, I
do, and
think
there are
even on the
other
way to the
competent
farm, she
people.
was slightly annoying, even
Yes.
though you hardly see her at all. It's yeah. This is probably the book where she became the most annoying to me.
Mm.
Well, no, there's the whole uh sucking up to Brigitte part that we already got past, but uh that was pretty annoying.
That part didn't bother me nearly as much as other parts because Birgitte is there to balance it out. That Birgitte's there to call Nynaeve out on her BS and to kind of figuratively and on the verge, it almost seemed like she was about to literally slap her in the face, which Nynaeve had needed for a while. Um, Nynaeve had kind of needed that since they left the tower again in The Dragon Reborn, and her and Egwene were constantly butting heads. Egwene needed it too, and she never quite got it, as we've ranted about. So that part I actually liked, and I was looking for more of that, kind of like what we were talking about last time with Lan, because that's kind of uh, the role that Lan serves now, when he just not purposefully but very calmly and quietly puts her in her place, um, because she needs that counterbalance. Okay, so uh, I just have kind of like three big ideas instead of just going through play by play here. I was wondering what you pulled out here, but in order to kind of move things along to get through this part with the girls, there are three things that kind of jump out at me, kind of three biggish things. And one is the first chapter, or on chapter 3, A Pleasant Ride. And it's part and parcel to what you were talking about there, is the exchange between them as they're riding to the farm. And then when they actually start to use the bowl, and then when they make their escape and, set off the nuke. Um, but uh
Well, one of my big thoughts on the way to the farm is Elayne. And we just made the comment about reading as a teen, as a preteen. You have to remember that she's still a teen.
mhm.
And my note to myself is page 89 in the hardback. I don't know what it is for you. It's basically the third page for me of the chapter. But
Yeah,
Adelais has ridden up and is very
yeah.
politician like, making a suggestion to her, having read the audience, knowing her and Avienda were talking about the Seafolk Windfinder, and Elayne's interaction with her. Adelaide gives really great advice. In fact, when you're reading up to that point with when she's talking to Avienda, you're like, no, let Avienda do what she wants to do, because it would reset the power balance because the
Yes.
sea folk took over with your deal. Well, then you
Mhm.
get it with Adelais coming up, and she doesn't even say it, but Elayne knows what she meant. And when she realized what she's alluding to, she kind of stiffens her back up and says, "Go away." And her pride takes over.
Yep.
So you can see her, she kind of having a little internal fit. Uh, and it, kind of a little side note on this, it's the whole hierarchy system they have that allows this to happen. This would never happen in a merit-based system, because yeah, she makes the comment that none of the other sisters would have done any better. And I'm like, including the gray in the group?
Exactly. There's a reason there's a gray there.
Yeah, and
Now,
then I
now
just wrote
it
after that,
wasn't to deal with the
pride,
sea
pride.
folk,
Yeah,
but it
it's
was to deal with Tylin and Ibudar. There's a reason there's a gray there. There's a reason there was a gray in charge when they sent the embassy to Rand. That's what these people do, and they have decades of experience in it.
yeah, the sea folk might have ended up still with the better end of the deal, but the gray probably would have done better because that's what she does.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
this is one of those places where I think Jordan makes the point that we always talk about, that the Aes Sedai are kind of made inept at this point, but he's making the point that Elayne just thinks they're inept because she thinks she knows better. And
Yeah.
having dealt with younger women, uh sorry, people are yelling again. We don't go walk to a person's room and ask them a question. We yell across the house. Uh but
Well, you're German, so there's a lot of yelling.
I'm not German. I'm Polish,
So
French.
there's a lot of yelling at you.
Exactly. And then I wave my white underwear. But no, what was I talking about?
Young women, having dealt with a lot of young women.
Oh yeah, having dealt with young women, I've gotten in altercations where experience in the knowledge area was actually something you need, and that's the last thing you want to say, because then they just buckle up and like, I know what I'm doing. I've lived enough.
That was
I've experienced this. And every young woman thinks they're so adult until they get about 40, and then they want to be so young. Uh,
that was one of the more interesting, one of the few things that wasn't infuriating about Peterson's interview with the swimmer Riley Gaines.
Riley Gaines, yeah.
Yeah, is she talked about that of we're different, not just physically, because she talked about how they would sometimes practice with the men's team, and so there's a huge physical difference there. But then also uh with friends on both teams, and she was the team captain of the women's team, talking about the difference between managing egos and managing hurt feelings, that guys just get over it. They just do. That's what happens. They fight and then they're done. And and she made the point that you could have a small thing at the beginning of the season that ruins the whole season because it festers.
Well, and he does, when he writes men in this book, what you're seeing with like Rand and Matt and Perrin is they grow up a lot in the last 2 years of their
Mhm.
life here.
Mhm.
And they do it the way he probably experienced in the military, where once you got into hardship, just things started falling together. Your preconceived notions of life just go away, and you find mentors, and then you learn to be a mentor, and you learn to depend on other people as time goes on. And this is where Rand is still struggling,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
Matt and Perrin seem to actually be getting it to some degree. But women tend to just think, well, I've got the knowledge, I've learned what I need to do, and I can just go in and do it. And this is actually pretty accurate to real life. And
It's interesting, and this may be another one of those instances of where he didn't know the technical details of it, but he intuitively knew the idea. It's mirrored in how men and women learn the power, because women are a slow, steady, linear progression until they reach their end point.
and
Men
remember,
are in fits and starts.
and remember, accessing the power is going the opposite of your nature.
Mhm.
Remember, females have to surrender, where men have to learn to calm everything else around them down and then reach out and take what they want.
That's an interesting point that I hadn't thought of, because it seems so masculine because you grab hold of Sidon and you surrender and let Sidar into you. But the the prelude to grabbing is not that different from surrendering,
Mhm.
because it is calming everything. It is shutting out the outside interference
Well,
and being calm.
let's look at parenting. How does a woman parent the child? Overbearing protection and control. How does the father parent the child? Laissez-faire until they do something wrong, and then I come down on you. That it's very akin to parenting in that. And
Hmm.
people talk about women being agreeable and surrendering all the time. No, that's not the case. Women, like I talked to you about the Hexaco
Mm.
spectrum, where they uh, basically separated honesty from emotionality. And it turns out women aren't as agreeable as you think.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just they know they can't overpower you. So it's when you look at mothering, it is about control. They try to control the environment around the child to make it as safe as possible. Where the father is like, yeah, go ahead, run across that street, see how that goes.
Yeah, see what happens.
Yeah.
All
Yeah,
right,
do the
so
flip off that swing. I'll watch.
back to the before we get deeper into the examples of what we're talking about here in the book, I want to back up a second, because when Adelaus comes up, so this is on the bottom of 87 on the paperback. Pardon me, I could not help overhearing that last. Um, Adelaus did not sound at all apologetic,
Well,
and Elayne
so
wondered just
the
how
thing I
much she
didn't
had overheard.
yeah, the thing I didn't connect there was if when Marilyl's ears stopped burning, did Marilil like spy on them and then they get onto her, but then like what did they actually say?
No, no, no. It was, I think it's just that Elayne realized they weren't talking as quietly as they could have or should have, and there were other people around closer, and she just wasn't thinking about it. And as she said, she felt her cheeks coloring. Some of what Avienda had said about Rand had been remarkably frank and straightforward. Some of what she had said had been too. It was one thing to talk about that way with your nearest friend, quite another to suspect someone else had been listening. So, on top of her, I'm the boss and don't tell me what to do, she's also got her backup because she, and to a certain extent Avienda as well, one of Elaine's flaws is that she hates being human, because she's caught up in this idea, and not it's not all wrong, that she has to be more than, because she's a symbol. As a princess, soon to be queen, she's a symbol. So
And an
she,
Aes Sedai,
and an Aes Sedai on
which is
top
going to
of
get
all
me
that.
to the next point here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So she does not like um
she doesn't know
having
what it
her,
is to be a normal person.
and she doesn't like having those human fallibilities on display for others. As she says here, it's one thing to talk to your nearest friend, you know, best friend, soon to be, adopted sister. And now there are strangers who are, and it's, I don't think it's just the subject matter they were talking about, the remarkably frank, let your imagination run wild about what that meant. Um, the remarkably frank stuff, I don't think it's just the subject matter. I think it is that it was personal, entirely personal, and acquaintances had been listening in and had heard what she was saying. So I think that that doubles up on her "thank you, you may leave me now" snootiness.
Which slightly leads into the next one I had, 94 in the hardback. It's when Van Dien rides up. And so now we've got a different subject there. Everybody's trying to get the kin and the Aes Sedai are trying to get Ispan, the Dark Friend, put over to the Aes Sedai instead of the kin,
Mhm.
which Elayne and Nynaeve have their reasons for having her where she is, because first of all, the best shielder of everybody is there. And
Yeah.
second of all, she understands that she needs to keep the black sister away from the other sisters. They may not know exactly why, but intuitively they actually have this one right.
Yeah.
But Van Dien comes up and she's talking about it's not that how the White Tower has their power. It's not through force. It's not through, even manipulation, even though she kind of skirts over that. But it's the influence. It's because they saw the White Tower as standing apart, something above. And the first thing that popped into my head was this whole thing we've gone through in the last 3 years, the experts.
Mhm.
Experts say,
Mhm.
there's this class of people that you're just never supposed to question. And she wants to continue that motif. And this thing they're doing is breaking away from that, because it is this person that was part of the experts that, yes, was a bad person. We still need to keep this in house. We still need to keep, go back to our freaking FBI conversation from Wednesday. Everything, even if there is any punishment, it's all kept in house. Nobody
Mhm.
needs to know. Nobody needs to be privy to this. We're just gonna sweep this under the rug. Y'all go back to your normal pleb life, and this is what we do.
Oh, that is the most interesting part to me of Egwene's storyline here in these few books is learning the secret history of the tower that is by law only the Emerald, the Keeper, and the Browns who keep the chronicles know that they even exist, let alone what's in them. And so when you start to and you know because of the way Jordan writes, you never get the full story because Sawan is not going to just lay it out. She's just going to give it in hints. Hey, remember what happened to this Amaryllis? Remember what happened here? So you just get hints of, holy crap, they have gone through some stuff that, and you get the. I think it even says out loud at some points that this isn't the first rebellion. This may be the first big, significant public split, but it's not the first rebellion.
So what you're saying is probably every president gets the actual information on JFK, and that's why they all go in lockstep.
Uh,
Did I just get us banned? This is why
so
they don't want RFK in the White House, because he actually really wants to get to the bottom of what happened to his uncle.
you're about to derail me with the story.
Okay, let's keep going. Let's get at least
All
to the
right.
farm, and
Re-
then you can derail.
Remember, next time we talk about this stuff, I have a story about Glenn Beck and George W. Bush that goes along with that. Okay. So,
Okay, let
did
me
you have
write that
any
down.
more thoughts to when they get to the farm?
See, 110. Okay, so they get to the farm, and that's where my next thought is. It's so go into what you're talking about, and I'll let you know if you pass me. Wait, let me write this down.
Oh, the next thought I had was um, when they actually start to use the bull. But as a little aside here, um,
Okay, so it's mine is before the bowl.
yeah,
Yeah.
but there is a bit of a fun nugget here at the end of this chapter when and then at the beginning of the next chapter with is it with Nynaeve when she comes up and is I don't know why you're in such a bad mood. Everything seems to be fine because she hasn't been dealing with it, but then immediately starts to take charge and um oh who is it the one that's in charge of Alice the one in charge of the farm that Nynaeve has this at first annoying and then uh as you start to understand her amusing imposter syndrome because she gets annoyed when and this is one of the things that when you get an Avienda point of view, she notices and goes, why is she like that? Um, but of course, Avienda does it too. She just does it in different ways and in different places. But she has to be the one to take charge, and uh, she gets annoyed at other people's competence when she shouldn't be. It it's fine if Alice has everything in control. It's fine if she brings her a hat just to, you should cover your face. It's very hot and sunny. You're still the one in charge. Alice can be competent and help you, and if you're secure in what's important and what you're supposed to be focused on, that shouldn't matter to you. And
Yeah, but you're forgetting that Nynaeve's still a woman. And everything is looked at through at least a slight lens of where's the string to this? What string is this person attaching to me?
and it's not without reason for Nynaeve, because one of the reasons she's acting like this is because of how much they had to fight in the previous two books to get recognized even as being Aes Sedai.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's
and take it all the way back to her history of being the youngest wisdom.
Yeah.
You don't think she's had these issues with the women's circle? The women's circle trying to guide her in the right direction?
And you see that from the very beginning with with without some stupid made up crap story about bigoted Aes Sedai. It's just, you hear it from and you get their reaction to know what Nynaeve is like when they're sitting in the green talking, and they bring up that Moiraine called her girl, and then all of a sudden realized who she was, or was told who she was, and then was very polite, very respectful, but it didn't matter because Nynaeve had already decided, you are my enemy because you called me girl. And that is what she has been fighting for years since she's been the actual wisdom. And it never goes away. That and it's kind of what we were just talking about with Riley Gaines. It's right there at the beginning of the book, and it never goes away.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that we can acknowledge something without thinking it's right, but knowing that it's natural. You can understand something's natural without thinking it's right. Yeah, she would be 100 200% more competent if she could get over this thing. But that's what makes us human, is we have things that we can't get over.
Yeah, and it's
we
hardly...
can, but they're hard to get over,
And he's a misogynist because he's writing these women who are flawed. Yeah, and hey, remember the last time we had the boys together, Rand and Perrin, and Min had to step up and say, "Hey, you two knuckleheads, stop puffing up like two strange roosters in the farmyard." You know, you know he's not going to do that, and you know he's not going to do that. Remember that you're friends, you idiots. So Min has to set them both down because they have their own flaws and foibles as individuals and as males, and it gets in the way, and it threatens, not only their friendship, but then this super very important save the world thing that they're trying to do.
Well, and even Matt, we get later, and I'm not going to say it in detail because of spoilers, but he gets someone who provides him with a lot of direction and a lot of freedom at the same time, which is exactly what he needs, and that's a female. Now, I think Sanderson wrote it horribly, but at the same time, that was the purpose of that relationship. So,
yeah. All right. Any other thoughts before we get on to the actual using of the bowl?
Yeah, no, because Elayne, again, in her childlike compassion and empathy, page 110 in the hardback. Instinctively, Elayne began to plan how to smooth matters over, how to get the Atha and Mir pains healed without them having to ask. And I'm like, you're ready to give away the bowl again. You just dealt with the sea folk. You just should have learned a lesson from dealing with the sea folk. And what was the lesson from the first time? You came to them with the request, so they had the high ground.
Yep.
You need to wait for them to ask. Now she kind of comes around in her own sulkiness and pettiness to just making the well, I hope they have to ask because I'm mad. But no,
but it's sulkiness and pettiness.
it's
It's
not
not understanding.
queenliness. It's yeah,
Yes.
it's not leadership. It's not, oh, we've been down this road before. You know what? If they want to ask for it, we're going to get the upper hand in that bargain, and we're going to even the playing field here.
And I think a lot of it is because she doesn't have to suffer the consequences. It's not going to be her that ends up having to teach the sea folk. It's not going to be her that has to deal with the other parts. It's going to be Egwene, or whoever's Amarillan, and then whatever Greys or whoever has to ultimately fulfill this bargain.
Which to me, if I was Egwene, after the books are over, which we kind of have, even if you haven't read it before, the last battle happens at some point.
Yeah.
Even if I'm Egwene or the Amarillan or whoever it is at the time,
I
I'm
don't
gonna be
care if
like,
you're queen. You get to go. You
yeah,
get
yeah.
to go spend your
You
year
and Nynaeve made this
teaching.
bargain. I don't care if you're the two most powerful of us. I don't care if you're queen. Y'all are first.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's not even spiteful. That's just fair.
Mm-hmm. Um, you and we're coming up. The final thought I had is when Elayne is face to face with the consequences of her actions, then she actually has a moment of, oh, oops. But she rarely extrapolates that, because we saw it last book too, where she finally had a moment of, oh gosh, I'm sorry, Matt. I've been wrong about you this whole time. You just I was a child in this thing's hand. It's like I was like a child, you know, in the mouth of a lion. And if it weren't for you, I would be very dead.
Mm-hmm.
And so she does finally have that moment because she's forced to. Um, and she should be able to see some of these things without having to experience the pain herself.
Which
Um,
which you know what? We talked about the golem last time. Uh and how kind of OP it is, and kind of the out for that was it has to listen to Forsaken.
mhm.
But it would have been a more compelling character if it was human in every other way, but it can't be touched with the power.
Huh. Yeah, that
Then
would
it
have.
could have been a badass assassin that was trained really well, but could be fought by normal means, but it's made to kill Aes Sedai, so it actually it just can't be touched with the power, and it takes advantage of that complacency to do its job. And that would have been more compelling of an enemy.
Yeah, probably. I think he wanted a monster,
Mm-hmm.
which is what the golem is. It's like the alien in Aliens. It is a terrifying killing machine, with that you cannot reason with and has absolutely no remorse in what it does. And in that way, he succeeded, because that's certainly what it is. It does get a little boring though.
Mm-hmm.
And it does get a little plot holy when you start thinking, okay, but why can't it just do this? Why doesn't it just do this? I mean, it is unstoppable except for Matt.
Mm-hmm.
So why didn't they
Well,
just
not
turn
not only
these,
Matt, just the Foxhead medallion.
just the Foxhead medallion,
Yeah,
which was
he
an
could he could
accident?
kill he could kill Matt in his sleep.
And you have to think that not even in the Age of Legends did they know this, so who knows where this Foxhead medallion came from. But otherwise, it probably would have known, because they would have made these things. If they knew that they could make this Terra angreal that would harm this thing, then they would have. So
Well, it's not a
the
Terran
biggest,
Grail though. It's a gift from the Aelfin.
yeah, but I'm pretty sure it's a Terra angreal.
No, they
I,
call it
I,
a Terran Grail, but I just think that's because they have no
Elayne
better word for it.
identifies it as
Yeah,
one. Yeah,
I think that's because they just now have no better word for it. I mean,
but
it's a thing that does things with the power.
the
Realistically, that's
point
what it is.
being, there were six of these things, and we see how ridiculously powerful it is. So what? How did the Shadow not just win?
Mm-hmm.
unless there's something in the lore that they were created too late in the war to have an impact, because when we see it in action, you have to think, I mean, not even Age of Legends people, they might be able to get away, but they would have nothing. I don't know that they would have any way of dealing with this thing.
Yeah, the
So,
the only way they would have to deal with it is to skim and then cause it to fall. That would be the only way to deal with a golem, other than the foxhead.
yeah. All right. So, where was I? Oh, yes, I was getting on to my last point. Um, oh no, second point actually. So the bowl. Here's why the using of the bowl is interesting to me. It's kind of frustrating because we've talked about this. We talked about this last time, I think, that the uh the sea folk is one of those storylines that kind of doesn't go anywhere, and it's a little bit frustrating and disappointing.
Yeah, this is like the climax of the Sea Folk storyline right here.
And when you see them taking charge, the way they do and wielding the bowl, uh, it's an immediate, and I think it was a purposeful point of these people aren't a joke. They know what they're doing. They may be out of their element a lot once they're off their ships. So they might, they look like fish out of water, but these people are very competent and powerful. When you see the way that they take charge, they immediately pull out, the strongest to wield the circle, how no nonsense they are, and then how um also how they are not afraid to put someone in charge who is a lower rank if they have more skill. So and you see that from the point of view of is it it's Elayne still, and she's watching as they do this, and you see, you know, very young windfinders who clearly have not been in the position long and don't have the jewelry denoting high rank, but they're taken into the circle because they have the power and the skill. Um, so I think this is Jordan purposely saying, hey, these people are no joke. Hey, remember when you first saw them back in the Shadow Rising, uh, and you thought, oh man, these guys are kind of cool when you just saw that one boat and that one windfinder, and then the ones we've seen since then are a little bit of a comic relief. And I think this is on purpose to show, these people have a lot to offer, especially when it comes to things like
The
dealing with
weather,
the weather, which is a
which
major
is a
thing,
major theme.
which
Yeah.
is a major thing that the Dark One uses to try and break the world, is to influence the weather. And so, well, I'll save that for spoilers. There's a spoiler thought there of why this doesn't come up again, or where this storyline doesn't go anywhere. But it,
Because I was actually having those same thoughts earlier.
yeah,
So yeah, we'll
well,
definitely talk about that in spoilers.
when you
If we're thinking about the same thing.
yeah, when you see the way the bowl is wielded by the sea folk, um, I feel like this is, as you say, this is the climax of their storyline, because it's all downhill from here. But it's something of a missed opportunity for me because it is so cool, the way that they take charge and the way they do this.
See, it's weird because usually with women you can have multiple climaxes, but here it just goes limp after that. So, you know,
Wah, wah.
womp womp.
Okay. Um, I I like the other thing to point out is I don't think we've really seen this much. You saw it a little bit when there was that bubble of evil and Saladar, and they linked with accepted and novices, and they were so tired. But uh, she mentions a couple by name who look like they're having trouble standing, and they weren't actually wielding the power; they were just having it siphoned through them.
Mm-hmm. You mean their
And
eyes didn't burn out and oh
it is so unnecessary and so stupid because it's right here in the lore that you say, right here in the source material, because that's something that one of them objects to is when they're being taught how to link because the sea folk didn't know. Oh, wait a minute. You're saying you can take control of someone? It doesn't work that way. There's a buffer, so you can never pull so much that you burn them out, and you can't control the person. You're just controlling the weave through them. And so, in order to have whatever the hell that moment was supposed to be, you've just ruined linking for the rest of the series when you didn't need to. You idiots. All right. Um,
Though I guess we'll talk about it in spoilers, but remind me, I have a slight forgiveness of that scene because the whole thing with the wall with the crossbows and instead of actually mounted cavalry and the them defending from way back and that whole thing actually has something to do with real life events, not just their own
okay.
ideas of the show. So, and it also has to do with Matt. So remind me to talk about that.
Okay. Well, speaking of hacky slashy fight time. All right. So then the Seanchan show up because that makes things more exciting. Um I really like the way Birgit takes charge here of when Elayne decides to start pulling the weave apart because I don't really know what I'm doing here, but one, I'm arrogantly overconfident, and two, she's right that you cannot risk the Seanchan learning how to gate because if they could travel, that would literally be the end of the world. Because the only thing holding them back is movement and
Mhm.
logistics and how long and difficult it is to move an army this big over land. So if they could travel, the world is screwed. Um, so it is a great Warder moment as well as a great Birgitte, just her personality moment of she's so uh flippant and snarky and happy-go-lucky. You know, she's the epitome of the happy warrior. But when it's not cutting time, she gets serious. And I really like how serious she gets. Um, e knowing how deadly and dangerous things are right now. I also like the way they use the gateway to their advantage of going around behind it because it is a one-way door.
Mhm.
So yeah, you can kind of see there, but you can't do anything through the other side. So I like how she's savvy enough to turn that around for them. Um, it, but this is what I meant about one of the few times Elayne comes face to face with the consequences um when her little mini nuke goes off, um, and she says, "Well, at least we found a new weapon to blow up the Seanchan." And Avienda says, "No, it doesn't work that way. It's it could have just been a fizzle. It could have just been a loud pop that made us all deaf. It could have stilled every woman within 20 miles." And it is akin to her moment with Matt at the end of the last book, but deeper because her relationship with Avienda is deeper. And this is where it's not just that one of her failings, and this is a problem for someone who's going to be a queen, is that she doesn't think about the consequences because she's not the one that has to deal with them. And this is the consequences slapping her in the face because it's not just, oh, I could have stilled myself. I could have stilled my best friend want to be adopted sister.
Mhm.
And then on the extra on top of that is that oh wow, and she knew that and she stayed with me. Um, this is the I think I've said before that in some of my rereads, I will skim through the girl storylines because some of them really annoy me at times. Um, uh, the Fires of Heaven one, they're that section while before they meet Galad, that it always kind of annoyed me and bored me. This is one of those times where I read the whole thing because of all that's been going on really since chapter 3 that we've been talking about. And then this moment here, because he has done such a good job of setting it up way back at the beginning when Aviendha goes to Saladar and there's that first kind of uncomfortable meeting of, the
Was
knife or the
I who
switch.
fucked the dragon?
Was I? So knife or switch, your choice. You know, and Elayne's hand is trying to grab the knife. Like, but all the way back to there, and then, you know, he's done a really good job of building their relationship up to this point, to where the girls climax together. And Elayne says, the first chance we get, I want us uh uh to go to the Wise Ones and be first sisters, because that's all the getting to know her she needs, is that because to Elayne, to someone who can channel, that is worse than death, because it is you know it's seriously maiming, and this holds true in modern psychology, is that military psychologists will tell you, and this is a component of psychological warfare among the more unsavory types, is that soldiers fear maiming more than they fear death. They would rather die than become an amputee or an invalid or, a paraplegic. They fear that more than death. Um,
It's
and
funny because it's a pre-fear.
mhm.
Everybody thinks, oh, would you rather be dead or have your neck broken? But the follow-up studies to that are people who actually have their neck broken and are paralyzed from the waist down, actually find meaning in their life
Yep.
and keep going on.
Yeah.
But it's the unknown. It's the fear of the unknown that's always the
Mhm.
the issue.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, there's I think I've referenced it before. There was one of the few good things the History Channel has done in recent history was a series called The Warfighters, and it was about the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, and it interviewed guys, and the reenactments weren't horrible, even though I hate reenactments. And they were talking to people who had, you know, a Green Beret who had been caught in an ambush and got hit in the back and was paralyzed. So he was paralyzed, basically from the neck down. Um, and 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 that he is a prime example of that. And he found meaning. He went back to his family. He's a father and a husband, and he's got meaning in his life. But if you had asked him before, he may have been one of those that said, "Oh man, I'd rather just take a bullet in the head," you know.
Mm-hmm.
But then when it happens, it's, life goes on.
Yeah, when things become permanent and they're accepted, then you actually cope very well. Uh, and that's counterintuitive, but
Mhm.
it's there. It's not that I wish that on myself, but if you can avoid it, please do it. But if it happens, there is still hope. So yeah, it's an interesting psychological thing. It's actually in the Comfort Crisis, because he talks about the fact that we have these thoughts is because we don't have anything wrong
Mm.
for the most part. Yeah, we have little things, but we're not paralyzed from the waist down. And then when reality hits you, you tend to find the things that are really good still.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is that. Well, there is the last few pages, it switches to some random Seanchan, which I think is pretty cool because you don't get a lot of Seanchan point of view um until later when a certain character shows up. But
But don't we get Julian later?
do we? Is this someone who shows up again?
Yeah, I think it is something someone who shows up again.
Okay. But I like.
I think he shows up when they're looking for that person you're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll have to see. But I like the back and forth because you're getting, just you're getting world building by two people just talking. There's no, you know, exposition. There's no boring, narrator. It's just two people talking, and then you can put the pieces together. You can read between the lines, and this is going to become a major component of the end of Rand's story in this book, and then subsequent books of what happens after, of why the ever victorious army is the ever victorious army, and how they are able to be an imperial army and get so many disparate peoples moving towards one goal.
My thing about this whole scene is surely they didn't get everybody through the gateways because there were people all over the place on the farm.
Yeah, I don't know if no, actually, because it's mentioned that there were some people who panicked, but I think and maybe it'll say later, when we come back to the girl storyline. I want to say that the people who panicked and fled weren't the kin. They were people who were there because it's known as a woman's retreat. So normal women will go there, um, to spend time. So I think all the kin made it through because they did start evacuating immediately as soon as they saw that thing. So, but you're right that there will be, there may be prisoners for the Seanchan to get, may
I'm talking
not
about
be.
just them getting nuked.
Exactly. They may not be, depending on how fast and how far they ran, because I think that there is uh, I later from the Seanchan point of view, I think it actually says how big the diameter of this blast is, and it's big. So yeah, I was not being flippant when I said mini nuke, because it's a fuel air bomb at least. All right. All right. So that is that, because chapter 7 is a goat pin and parent storyline. And I got to work myself up to dealing with parent storyline from here on out, because it gets a little frustrating.
Yeah, let's because that goes up to chapter it goes another 100 pages at least. So let's try
Mhm.
to do that all in one go next time. So
Yeah.
so we can at least eliminate the blah by having it ready and kind of condensed.
Yeah, I'm gonna see what I can do to pull out the positive,
Yeah, chapter 7 to
because
chapter 11 is what it is.
uh it knowing where it goes makes it worse. Makes parents' storyline here even worse. Knowing where it ends up. But
Well,
I
I've got something to make that part of it much better because we have all these feminist writing on the end of that part.
oh dear.
And so we can actually like talk more about what they're writing about than what was actually written. And that might be more fun.
And
Uh
I'm curious if Scott feels the same way, that part of the problem with parents' storyline here, from this big chunk from here to pretty much the end of the series, is this stuff that's going on here in Geldan and what's the other, Altera. Um, it feels like such a letdown. It feels like such a sideshow, because you go from the highs of the Shadow Rising and the defense of Edmonds Field and the Two Rivers, a huge high, and then we don't see him for a book. But then when he comes back, he manages to top that with Dumai's Well.
mhm.
And then it's like, and now what are you doing? And is it even that important? Is it even that
Well, okay, so
interesting?
let's go into spoilers. Spoilers. All right.
Ah,
So
go
we're
away.
in spoilers. Yeah, that's the whole point that you just made my whole point that I was going to make. Rand and Perrin and everybody could have just let the Shido do what they did there. And everything still would have been exactly the same when it came to the last battle. Only you had a few more of your troops that you didn't send off to deal with the Shido.
That's a good point, because one of the hallmarks of bad writing nowadays, of writing, which is bad, is that the the characters don't impact the story. Stuff happens from happenstance, or what they do wouldn't have mattered anyway. And that's I hadn't really thought of it in those terms, but that's why it feels like such a meh, is because so much of it is just kind of coincidence.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's
I mean,
Perrin isn't really
realistically,
driving
the
the story.
Shido and Massimo's crew would have fought each other,
Hmm.
and whoever won would have won.
And
The winner would have been severely decimated, and then the
then you would
white
have a
folks would have taken
buffer
care
with,
of them.
or the Seanchan. You would have a
Yeah, yeah.
buffer there with whoever's left, and the Seanchan are going to have to deal with them,
Mm-hmm.
which is what kind of ends up happening. So
Yeah, so the exact same end result, only Massimo's dead, and
the only it feels like the entire point of Perrin's story is to put Perrin and Morgase in front of Galad so that they meet.
mhm.
It really feels like that is the entire point of this storyline, and it drags on way too long before that actually happens.
Which is an important event, but you could have done it without the whole other.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's also to tie up because he started this with the hawk and the eagle on his shoulder, or the
Mhm.
falcon and the evil
Falcon. Yeah.
falcon and the eagle on his shoulder. So yeah, it ties up that, and Elayne trying to do Elayne
Hmm.
the whole time. But I mean, it's like Elayne, a distraction. It really is.
And you can see Lane, and there was so much fan of, all right, we need to get Lane and Galad in the same room together. And we do eventually, briefly at the very end. And it's, if the whole point was to get Perrin and Morgase and Galad together, why couldn't he have done that so much quicker?
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing I can think is, well, two things. One, he thought that what Perrin was doing in that part of the world was important. And two, if he had moved him quicker, he wouldn't have had anything for Perrin to do. Because by the time he gets out of this obnoxious mess, there's really nothing for Perrin to do, except deal with Slayer and then be there for the last battle.
Mm-hmm.
So it is, and for that reason, is something of a letdown. It's a good way to put it. Because almost all of it doesn't matter.
Which someone as important is the third leg of the tripod as Perrin.
Mm-hmm.
You needed something bigger for him. No, he tried to make it big, but it was useless big.
Mm-hmm.
It was bigger than it had to be, was the problem.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right. So were there any other comments we needed to get to?
No, I went through all the comments.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
So
Well, no, the one about Varen, just real quick. There's a cottage industry of that moment where Varen has been suspicious since she rode up after the boys in the Great Hunt. She said Moiraine sent her, but a careful reader should already perceive that their timelines make that virtually impossible. But the way it's phrased is she said Moiraine sent me, and then she gave a self-satisfied nod and smile. So you're left with the impression that somehow in her head she was able to justify that. Or was she? It also makes me wonder, when they tell Moiraine that, it makes me wonder what went through Moraine's head of, does she know, wait a minute, did Varen somehow twist my words so that she could say that? Or did Varen just lie?
well,
Because
and having
that
read
would,
New Spring, she's already looking for every lie out there. So
exactly. So that makes me wonder, ooh, what would have been going through Moraine's head there, But my guess would be, ooh, she may be black, but I've got the dragon in front of me here. That's all that matters. Whereas Varen knows, because Varen's on the inside, that no, all three of them are important, and the shadow cares about all three of them and is trying to deal with all three of them.
Yeah, and back to Perrin, Matt's importance was pretty obvious because he turned the tide of the last battle itself.
Uh-huh.
But Perrin's was really stupid because Issam, I don't know. I can't see he would have done a lot
Yeah.
with Moiraine there and Nynaeve there, and it still was unclear what he was going to do to those two when he finally broke through.
Yeah, it's another Perrin isn't being a strong protagonist there because what he does that actually matters most is moving the dream spike, but he doesn't realize what he's doing or what he's done
Mm-hmm.
to or the impact that had.
And you don't get enough of an epilogue to make him what everybody's theory for Perrin was, or at
Yes.
least a very large chunk of the
The
theory for
the,
Perrin
the hammer.
was the rebuilder. Yeah,
Yes.
the
The,
person
the
who.
the whole point of him having to choose between axe and hammer in dreams and other things was the hammer, because he's the one that's going to kind of help put things back together.
Mm-hmm. And but you really don't get that because the epilogue is pretty damn short.
Yep. Yep. All right. Well, hopefully we'll be able to pick out some more positives uh next time, because boy, are we ending this on a downer.
Well, so we've talked about timelines, and the new series comes out in September, which we might take a break just to complain about the
Yeah,
show. Let's at least try to get through Winter's Heart by then, because I know you liked Winter's Heart a lot.
I really did. Yeah.
Yeah, so let's try to get through that to end our book series stuff on a positive note. For that little respite, we can bitch and moan and claw our eyes out about the series.
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
Uh, what did I write here? Real life events about the last show. Oh, my
Oh yeah.
the insight on the show. So the last two episodes were filmed, not just edited and all that stuff, but filmed under the new COVID restrictions. They were filmed during lockdown.
Oh.
So that whole last bit was actually done around all the new rules. So social distancing, notice how far apart each of the girls are when they're in their circle, and the CG with one person being shown in a time inside that wall with the
Yeah.
crossbows.
Yeah.
Apparently that was all rewritten around everything that just happened. So it was supposed to be something different. We don't know what it was supposed to be, but it was supposed to be something different. And the whole end of the show was rewritten around the new rules.
So this is something that the nerd people that I watch have been griping about for a while, and I find interesting because I wonder why. Uh, CG should be getting better, and yet it seems to be getting crappier,
Mm-hmm.
because you should be able to do work around the rules with that when you consider how few people were actually at Helm's Deep. And that movie's 20 years old. Most of that army on both sides is CG, and it looks good. It holds up to this day. And yet the CG in major motion pictures now, I hear a lot of people complaining about looking like crap. I mean, I think it's one of the reasons Maverick did so well is because those were real planes doing real stunts. Yeah, there was camera trickery to make it look more dangerous than it was, but those were real planes doing real stunts. I'm curious as to why CG has gotten so bad when budgets are ballooning. Because you would think, oh, well, if the budgets are ballooning, then they can spend money on the effects. But I guess they're not, because they look like crap.
Well, it's over reliance. So it's basically cartooning everything with CG
That's a good point.
instead of taking some real things and then making it look like it's doing the thing you want it to do. Like you said, camera tricks around Maverick, but also just little nudges here and there with the AI to make something else look better. I mean, go back to freaking the original Star Wars. Those TIE fighters and everything going through and fighting each other looked as good as the freaking prequels that were all CG, and they were toys with a black background.
The 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 Death Star was, I can't remember the number, but I think I was reading from one of the special effects guys, and I think it was like 70 model battleship kits that they got, and they just started, putting stuff everywhere. So nothing was recognizable as something, you would know from a model battleship. And that's how they made, those sections of the Death Star that they went over with the camera, and it looked like something completely different in science fiction. Um, I think that's a good point. And taking Helm's Deep as an example, if you go back and rewatch, I rewatched that recently with the kids, and there's not a ton of time on that CG army, because you'll get action scenes of the army charging, of the army fighting, but then it'll cut back to the main characters and a handful of extras standing behind them on on a real set that actually looks like stone.
Well, and even when you see the army, you'll see a few regular actors, and then it just kind of blurs off into this great vast army. The blurring
Yes.
off is all the
Yeah, yeah.
CG, where you actually have the real actors up front.
Yeah, like one of the first times you see the Uruk-hai marching forward, this big Uruk guy walks up on this hill to blow a horn, and so there's a real guy, and then behind him is the CG army marching. So if they would use it more sparingly, they could make it not suck. But they suck, so they don't.
But yeah, that was the whole thing. Apparently, there was supposed to be a big everybody's fighting battle
and
scene,
that's
but
where that tangent came from, because in the end of the book, it's Shinaran heavy cavalry, making repeated charges into the pass, into the Trollocs. The same thing we're going to see later at the end of the series, when the last battle starts. And you could do that with quality CG. You could do that. The guys who did Helm's Deep, no doubt, could do that and make it look good. So you even could have done that with your COVID rules, because you have Agilmar standing there, sitting on his horse with just a few guys behind him as his aides, watching the battle unfold and giving orders, and then joining the final charge himself. And so you've got, a half dozen real people, and then the rest is CG. So I feel like you still could have done that within the COVID rules if you could do CG that didn't suck.
So two things. First of all, you have diversity hires for your CG now. Second of all, you have probably people who were making this saying, well, that's now not how I would defend a gap like that. I could do it better. We would have crossbows in this wall that would like shoot down, and like, yeah, nobody could get close. But then we'll have them still win, because they've never seen war and they don't know how war exists.
And we'll kill someone who's important later in the story, but we don't
bunch
care.
of people who played Tower Defender or whatever the kids play on the thing. That it's like, well, we just have this shooting, and then we upgrade, and then Ben plays one of those games. It's like monkeys that go through, and the monkeys shoot the balloons that come through, and yeah.
That would have been a better finale than what we got.
But it's closer than actually what was in the books. So,
on that note, all right, well, we'll see y'all next time.
Yep.